Hitler knows that he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. If we can stand up to him, all Europe may be free and the life of the world may move forward into broad, sunlit uplands. But if we fail, then the whole world, including the United States, including all that we have known and cared for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age, made more sinister and perhaps more protected by the lights of perverted science. Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties, and so bear ourselves that, if the British Empire and its Commonwealth last for 1,000 years, men will still say, this was their finest hour.
Oh, stirring stuff, Jim.
That, of course, was the Prime Minister Winston Churchill. It was literally like he was in the room.
It's like he's in this room. I don't think it's like he's in that room, but there we are, or anyone else's room. Welcome to We Have Ways of Making You Talk with me, Al Murray and James Holland. And, well, welcome to our series that's looking at the 85th anniversary of the Battle of Britain. And those stirring words from Winston Churchill, teeing up events, of course, as they're beginning to occur. Isn't that right, Jim?
Yeah, it certainly is. And you know, I've got to say, obviously, when he gave that speech on the 18th of June, that was 4 days away from the strategic earthquake of the French armistice on the 22nd of June, 1940. But, you know, it just makes the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, makes me tingle, because this is the daddy. This is the summer of 1940. This is the Battle of Britain. It's a turning point in the war. Also, from a personal point of view, you know, it might be Arnhem for you, but for me, my heritage myth is Battle of Britain and summer of 1940 and Spitfires and the White Cliffs of Dover and all the rest of it.
Yeah.
Now, this is my entry point for World War II back in the day. So I'm very, very excited that we're doing this actually, finally, at long last, in some depth on this, the 85th anniversary.
But I think it's worth rehearsing the reason this is such an important moment, because France has been defeated in incredibly short order, catching the entire world out. You know, the Germans have achieved in a matter of weeks what it took them 4 years to fail to do in the First World War. Knock France out, knock Britain out of Europe. And the next thing that Hitler has to do, he has to break Britain to be able to carry on the war the way he wants to carry on the war, which is ultimately, as we all know, to turn on the Soviet Union. But he can only really do that with any degree of breathing space if Britain's out, is the truth. And the Germans know this, he knows this.
Absolutely, because he can't afford to fight a war on two fronts. You know, that's the bottom line. You know, and hovering in the wings on the other side of the Atlantic is the United States of America with all its potential for industrial and material might. And he knows that. And this is what's so amazing about this speech, because he's absolutely spot on. You know, the whole fury and might of the enemy must soon be turned upon us. Well, you know, from an air point of view, yes, that's absolutely correct. Hitler knows he will have to break us in this island or lose the war. Yeah, absolutely spot on. I mean, that is what this is about. You know, and he says, you know, if we fail, the whole world, including the United States and all that we know and care for, will sink into the abyss of a new dark age made more sinister by the lights of perverted science. Well, you know, Cyclone B's around the corner. Hasn't happened yet, but that's, you know, I mean, how prescient is this? I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah, and Britain has someone to articulate this at this point, because up to this point, it hasn't had that. This isn't the Chamberlain style of going about things, is it? So this is a speech that's heard by pretty much 60% of the British population via radio, one way or another. There's 65% of people listen to it when it goes out on the 15th of July. It's a big and important moment. But obviously, this is the war as no one has expected it to pan out, has it? So whatever preparations the British may have made for an air battle over Britain, this isn't the air battle they've prepared for.
No, because it really isn't. Because back in March 1940, it's recommended that Fighter Command expand to 60 squadrons. Everyone agrees on that by September 1940, not by the 18th of June 1940, by September 1940. But it's assumed back in March that the Germans will be kept out of France and the Low Countries and Norway, for that matter, which, you know, they're now basically, we've got German troops and indeed airfields all the way down the coasts immediately opposite Great Britain. And it's generally been accepted that Luftwaffe bombers would be unescorted. And therefore, you know, if you've got a half-decent air defence system and a half-decent number of fighters, they're going to get massacred. But the strategic earthquake of the fall of France changes everything, because suddenly German bombers and dive bombers and fighters can now operate over much of southern England, from South Wales to the Humber estuary, An aircraft threatened northern England and Scotland, which had not really been previously considered, with all those various naval bases and installations up there as well. So, suddenly you're expecting your 60 squadrons, which don't even exist in June, to do more than you had originally planned.
This is the strategic disaster the British state has always tried to prevent happening in Europe, which is the Low Countries and the Channel coast basically falling into the hands of an aggressive power. But now there's aircraft. This is the disaster. The great fear for disaster, strategic disaster, with knobs on because it's playing. This is the absolute on steroids calamity that the British state, since Queen Elizabeth has fought to, Elizabeth I has fought to control the Low Countries and keep enemies out. Churchill with his historic sense knows this. This is absolutely as bad as it could possibly be, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also worth pointing out that they're expecting the kind of whatever weight of German bombers come over to England, they're expecting that to cross from, Essex, Suffolk and Norfolk across East Anglia. And now they're not. They're going to come from across Kent and Sussex because they're now going to be positioned at the closest point so that the German fighter planes can get there with the most amount of fuel still in their bellies. And that means the emphasis is going to be coming on southeast of England rather than the central part of England. Old Saxon England rather than Mercian England. And so that's also changing everything. They've also lost their army. I mean, that's been left behind at Dunkirk and all its kit. Everyone seems to have sort of fallen at the knees of the Nazi regime. Only Britain stands alone, albeit Britain with dominions and empire and 500 million people. But they're not in Britain at this moment.
Yeah.
And the problem is long term, Britain's got pretty good chance because it's got the world's largest navy, world's largest merchant navy. It's got access to the world's oceans. It's got friends all around the world. It's got its empire and dominions and extra imperial assets in South America, etc., etc. But they're not here now in the third week of June or in the beginning of July. And that's the problem. And Britain knows that it hasn't got enough fighter planes because they've lost over 350 or whatever it is in France. They're short of planes, short of pilots, short of absolutely everything, and they're staring down the barrel. And, one recalls Ralph Richardson in the Battle of Britain movie. And the terrible thing is he's right. And that's the sort of the situation. And it's a very, very, very tricky situation for Britain at this moment.
So Saturday, the 22nd of June, the French signed the surrender. And the condition of the surrender signed in that railway carriage at Compiègne is, of course, that the French fleet has to be demobilised and disarmed, which basically means handed over to the Germans in the long run. And this is as calamitous as it could be. If the Germans can become a naval power by stealing the French Navy, by acquiring the French Navy, things are going to get a lot more difficult before they get better. And then the following day, HMS Ark Royal and Hood arrive in Gibraltar. So capital ships are responding to this. And then Monday, the 24th of June.
Well, not least, and the reason for that is obviously to protect Gibraltar, which is a British asset, but also because much of the French fleet is either in Toulon in southern France or in North Africa in French-owned ports in Algiers and Iran.
Yeah, so you've got the option of bottling them up. And then the Monday, the 24th of June, the Oberkommandestes here, which is the German Army High Command, starts saying, right, let's get ready for preparations against England. So things are moving very, very quickly. The fighting ends in France the following day, the 25th of June. And then Wednesday, the 26th of June, the important news is that Turkey announces she will remain non-belligerent.
Not getting involved this time.
No, thanks!
Prompting both sides to try and woo Turkey over.
At the end of the week, on the Friday, you have Force H under Admiral Somerville, which is Ark Royals, battleships Valiant and Resolution, the light cruiser and Arethusa. So the Navy's organising itself. And that same day, the US National Defence Act is passed because the Americans are starting to go, crikey, we've outsourced our defence policy to Europe. It's gone under. What do we do now? And de Gaulle is recognised as leader of the Free French. This is a week in which lots is happening very, very, very quickly. Nothing much on the Saturday. Then on the Sunday, the Germans take the Channel Islands.
Yeah, day off. Yeah, but that's the thing. You forget about that. The Germans are occupying the Channel Islands. So, the British decide that they can't hold them. There's no point. So they just give them up. They hand them over. And suddenly that is British territory now, flying the swastika and all the rest of it. It's another reminder of just how close the Germans are getting. It feels like they're kind of closing in on Britain. And it doesn't matter that you've got all these huge assets in your favour from a British point of view, such as the world's largest navy and all the rest. This all feels very febrile, very tense, very, very worrying indeed. Everyone else seems to have fallen at the knees of the Nazis. Why are we going to prevent it too?
Yeah, well, I mean, it feels like a house of cards, doesn't it? The entire thing. The other thing is something that's really worth remembering, because we've done podcasts about Dunkirk, about Operation Dynamo. There are other evacuations going on. All over France, in fact.
Well, including, let's look here, 144,000 British, 18,000 French, 24,352 Poles.
Yeah.
4,938 Czechs, 163 Belgians. They're all coming over to Blighty.
And on that same day, Göring issues a general directive for the operation of the Luftwaffe against England. The Luftwaffe is now going to build up its strength for whatever's going to come next in England. As we're going to see, the Germans aren't entirely sure whatever comes next in England, but they've got 3 Luftflotte air fleets, 2, 3 and 5 who are in Norway. And this is the beginning of the Germans trying to figure out what it is they're going to do next.
They've got to attack Britain, but that's about as far as it goes at this stage. And don't forget, the Luftwaffe is not in the Pas-de-Calais. I mean, they're in Germany at this point. So they've got to, if they're going to hit England, they've got to move.
Well, I mean, what have you had weeks that busy in your life, Jim? Or that disastrous ever?
Well, occasionally quite busy, but no, not quite in this league, I'd say.
I mean, the sheer calamity of it all. Into July, the German army then, under Halder, starts planning an invasion. This is remarkable because, when you consider that Operation Yellow, Fall Gelb, the thing the Germans did to conquer France, was a roll of the dice anyway. The whole point was to get it over with as quickly as possible. It's the only plan they can come up with that they think will work in the immediate, because the Germans have to do everything immediately. And now here they are planning an invasion. How hyped and high on their supply must they have been in German high command at this point? I mean, how the high-fiving, relentless high-fiving.
Well, they wouldn't do that bit, would they? They'd slap their thighs.
Slapping their thighs and clicking their heels. And then on the following day, the 2nd of July, Hitler orders preparations to begin for what's called Operation Sealion.
Although I should add, it's not called Operation Sealion at this point.
It's Lion. He hasn't upgraded to Sealion.
And then 3rd of July, I mean, meanwhile, U-boats are sort of hitting convoys and stuff and various ships out in the western approaches because all the Navy is basically protecting the kind of east coast of England. So none of these convoys and troop ships are protected, so they're having a field day, what becomes known as the first happy time. But then on Wednesday, the 3rd of July, you've got Operation Catapult, of course, which is the destruction of the French fleet at Mers-el-Kébir and Oran. This is to neutralise the French fleet and stop it from going over to the German side. And they've warned the French and said, come on over, just hand them over to us, or come to friendly ports and work on our part, and everything will be fine. But they don't, and so they open fire, and nearly 1,300 French sailors are killed. But, it also shows that the British are not going to roll over and that they've got a ruthless streak too.
Hitler then, by the 6th, he returns in triumph to Berlin. The hope in Germany, actually, that the war will be over soon. There's certainly the public feeling that maybe this is it, that actually things are going to end. The German public have been ambivalent at best about the war. And things happening very fast works well politically for Hitler, whereas things being drawn out might not. There is this sort of political imperative within Germany to get a result sooner rather than later, isn't there? With the public and the Nazis. The Nazis are many things, but they do keep very close tabs on public opinion and try and watch the barometer of public opinion when they're deciding what to do next.
There is a huge point that Hitler is. He's completely thrown by this. I mean, the speed of success is just beyond all his wildest hopes. And now he doesn't really know what to do. But because he's a continentalist, because he's a landlubber, and for him, the army is the most important thing. He's not looking at Britain's dilemma through their eyes. He's looking at it through the prism of his own kind of worldview. And his worldview is, surely they're going to come to the peace table because they're defeated. Well, they're not actually defeated because they've got a very small army and they've got a very large navy, and they're an island, and they've got the sea in between, and and all the rest of it. So there's lots of reasons not to. But he also doesn't want to have to make a decision against Britain, because there's a part of him that's also thinking Britain should be on our side. We don't want to have to fight against Britain because actually we're not that strong. You know, we've managed to sort of wing it so far and got away with it, and everyone thinks that we're this huge sort of military behemoth. But actually, you know, a big, long, drawn-out fight against Britain with America, that's not cool. So hopefully they'll just sue for peace. He's constantly saying he's going to make a peace offer to Britain. So he tells Goebbels on the 6th of July that he's going to make a peace offer to Britain. But he's already told his secretary 3 weeks earlier that he was going to do this.
Yeah.
So, you know, by the time the next week is up, that would have been a month where he hasn't done anything. So he's now sort of letting Britain stew, and then he's going to make them an offer which they'd be mad not to accept. But what he's really doing is he's just delaying having to make a decision because he doesn't know what to do for the best.
He's on the horns of his own dilemma, and his own personality, in fact, is part of his dilemma. On the 10th at the Berghof, he calls commanders together to hear views.
So he does his big triumph in Berlin on the 6th. You know, million people, million flags, all the rest of it, everyone waving and cheering. Then he buggers off to the Berghof, which is his favourite place in the world. It's his house that he's bought and expanded in the early 1930s. And this is where he goes. He loves this place. And this is where he can get a bit of calm and sort of beautiful mountain air and all the rest of it. But this is where he gets all his commanders to come and present to him. And it's a very, very odd situation because they have the OKW, which inherently is a good idea, which is the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht, which is the kind of a tri-service, Army, Navy, Air Force, High Command. But there is no sense of joint planning. So he just gets all his service chiefs to come and present to him their plans for the invasion of Britain. And they're all obviously completely contradictory. So first up is Gross Admiral Raeder and the Kriegsmarine. And Raeder's very nervous about this. He thinks the invasion should be a last resort. He's worried about clearing enough mines in the channel, suggests landing on a very, very narrow strip. And, you know, says we don't have any landing craft. So getting the barges to take the troops across is going to be a problem. He's calling it Operation Lion at this point. Then 2 days later, on the 12th of July, is Jodel's appreciation. And Jodel is at the AKW. He's the head of the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht. He says, well, you know, Britain's on its knees. The situation's hopeless. Of course they're going to see sense. But on the other hand, if Britain does stubbornly hold out, then we'll have to destroy the RAF. But we also need to stifle Britain's economy. So U-boats are going to be important. And once we've done that, then we'll have a landing. And obviously, destruction of the RAF is a prerequisite. I mean, the way Jodel tells it all just sounds so simple.
On the 13th, you get von Brauchitsch and Halder, who come from France, and they say it's a river crossing. We'll treat it like a large river crossing. They're sort of completely harebrained approach. And Halder says the Fuhrer is greatly puzzled by Britain's persisting unwillingness to make peace. He sees the answer as veto in Britain's hope in Russia, and therefore counts on having to compel her by main forces to agree to peace. What's interesting here is these service chiefs, they're all coming to pitch because Hitler has no strategy. So they're trying to fill in the blanks and offer him what they think they can do. There's no one saying, right, this is what we're going to do next, so tell me how to achieve it. It's just like, what you got for me?
Well, yes, and you can see the prevarication of Hitler. He also expresses his concern that if Britain collapses, then so too would an empire, which would then only benefit Japan and the USA. And Japan is not part of the Axis until the 30th of September 1940. So at this point, isn't. How does that leave him? So he's kind of hedging his, he just doesn't know what to do. So on the 15th of July, it's the turn of Admiral Canaris, who's the head of the Army, Navy and Air Force intelligence. And Gerhard Engel is the Army ADC. He keeps a diary throughout all this time. It's fascinating, by the way. And he goes, my impression is that Führer is now more irresolute than ever and does not know what to do next. So on the 16th of July, Hitler issues Directive Number 16 on preparations for a landing operation against England. And it's now called Operation Sealion. And he also announces that he's going to make his peace offer speech from the Kroll Opera House in Berlin on the evening of the 19th of July. He leaves the Berghof. He goes back to Berlin to Kroll Opera House. There's this huge occasion. He awards various people with promotions. So Göring is promoted to Reichsmarshal, which, as we've said before, is the world's only 6-star general. Göring has a new uniform made of soft light grey, and his valet questions this and says the fabric is a woman's fabric. And Göring goes, if I wear it, then it's for men.
Hitler says, eventually,
I feel obliged in this hour by my conscience to direct one more appeal to reason to England. I believe I can do this not as someone who was defeated, but as a victor. I see no compelling reason for this continuation of this war.
But basically, there's nothing in it. The British government listened to it. It's certainly not going to move things in any meaningful direction. So the War Cabinet go, right, fine, well...
Where's the Hitler of the old days? Where's the rousing, the rabble rousing? Where's the spittle? Where's the kind of, all that kind of stuff? None of it. It's a real damp squib.
Who would know what to do in this situation? Because this situation is totally out of anyone's expectations.
Everyone's desperately, furiously trying to second guess. I mean, that's the truth of it. But anyway, so the British decide to just ignore it entirely. Then at the War Cabinet the following day, they kind of think, well, okay, we've got to do some kind of response. So he now decides that it is Halifax who needs to reply to this speech. And as it happens, Halifax is due to make a routine broadcast on the evening of the 22nd of July of the BBC. So emphatically rejects the peace officer, and that is that. And Hitler, meanwhile, heads off to the Bayreuth Opera Festival, because he loves a bit of Wagner. But meanwhile, things have already been happening in the air and across the channel. So when we come back after the break, we shall be looking at that.
Welcome back to We Have Ways of Making You Talk. And the air is beginning to, fill up with German aircraft base, isn't it, Jim?
Well, it is, and German pilots too, who are writing diaries at this time, and not least Oberleutnant Siegfried Bethke, who is from the first group of Jagdgeschwader 2. On the 12th of July 1940, he jots in his diary, "General situation. No one knows anything. The large-scale concentration of troops for action is apparently completed. In Germany, apparently, thousands of simple 10-man boats with small auxiliary engines are being built for the invasion. All rumours. What is really happening? Bomb attacks from both sides every day and night." There's quite a lot going on in that little diary entry, isn't there?
He's saying he doesn't believe a word anyone's saying. But, I mean, you might live in a world of rumour when you've just knocked France over the previous month and you don't know what's going to happen next. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because at the top they're in a funk, and the funk has found its way all the way down to pilots and aircrew.
And it's the usual thing that the guys who are having to do the action are the last people to know what the hell is going on. Bethke is at Beaumont-le-Roger, which is, I think, if I remember rightly, kind of east of Caen. Battle Britain starts on the 10th of July, 1940. But as Dowding, Commander-in-Chief of RAF Fighter Command, who wrote the dispatch, which provided those dates, pointed out, the Battle of Britain, as far as he's concerned, starts on the 3rd of September 1939. Anyway, be that as it may, the point is there is no precise day when things start happening, but things are already happening in July. And
we're going to pick a day and we're going to stick to it, and there will be no controversy about when the Battle of Britain starts ever again.
All right, well, I'm going to say the 3rd of July then, 1940, because that is the day that convoy OA-178, which is an ocean-going convoy of 14 ships heading to Nova Scotia from London, plus a whole load of local coasters, which makes going through the channel 53 ships in all. They sail from Southend on the 3rd of July. They pass through the Straits of Dover overnight, but by dawn the French coast is still in sight, and the convoy starts to get absolutely hammered. I mean, really hammered. And then again on the 4th of July, early in the morning, 33 Stuka dive bombers then dive bomb Portland as well, and Dorset coast. The convoy is near Portland by the afternoon and blitzed again. And then overnight on the 5th of July, S-boots, Schnellbooter, which are these sort of very, very fast kind of 40 plus knots wooden torpedo boats, attack the convoy too. And in all, 5 ships are sunk, 11 damaged, 5 further damaged in Portland Harbour. It's a 30% loss rate. And after that moment, it's decided that no more ocean-going convoys are going to be passing through the Straits of the English Channel anymore. And that's a big moment, and they can only be attacked because by this point there are already sufficient Stukas at French airfields, captured at French airfields in northern France and the Low Countries.
I think that makes a strong case for the Battle of Britain starting then. Göring orders Richthofen's 8th Air Corps to start attacking Channel Sea traffic on the 2nd. Let's say the start of July.
Beginning of July. Come on, let's just call it. Let's just call it.
Yeah, we're calling it. There we are. There we go. And there's no controversy from here on in.
So what I now need to do is go back to my Battle of Britain book, chop it in half, and reissue it starting in July. It's actually not a bad idea.
That's a commercial opportunity if I've ever heard of one.
From then on, every day, the numbers are starting to increase. So it's interesting looking at the casualties, I think. So RAF, and this is not just Fighter Command, by the way. This is casualties in the RAF. So it's also including Blenheims that are going on. So On Wednesday, the 10th of July, official day of the start of the Battle of Britain, but not official for us, RAF lose 2 aircrew killed and 2 aircraft shot down. Luftwaffe, 29 aircrew killed and 11 aircraft shot down.
But Jim, you can see why Dowding might have picked that day for the start of the Battle of Britain, because the odds are very much like RAF's doing well that day, right? But on it goes, and I think you're absolutely right. This is the drip, drip, drip of attrition and of the 2 air forces sort of figuring each other out and figuring out what they're going to do. As you say, on the 11th, there's more shipping attacks. The RAF lose 3 aircrew, 6 aircraft. The Luftwaffe lose 41 aircrew with 7 aircraft. I mean, that's
a lot.
That's steep, isn't it?
It is in the context of the wider picture, yeah.
The other thing to remember is the Luftwaffe has been at it since May the 10th. The tempo of operations for the Luftwaffe has been relentless since the campaign in Northwest Europe.
Yes, and it feels to a lot of these guys it's just a continuation. So what's happening at the moment is Stukas are attacking whatever shipping they're finding in the channel. It's mainly Stukas at this point. There are a few Junkers 88s, but most of the heavy bombers haven't arrived at this stage. They're in the process of moving up. Luftflotte 5, Air Fleet 5 is moving up to Norway. It's already there, really, pretty much. Luftflotte 2 is the largest by far, and that is in northern France. And then Luftwaffe 3 under Spurler is in Normandy.
Yeah.
So it takes time to get all these planes up. But the Stukas are attacking shipping. They don't want to give the British any respite. It's not the all-out attack yet, but this is kind of sort of needling operations. Let's kind of sort of chip away as much as we possibly can while we're waiting for the full-scale attack. We're waiting for the Führer to announce his plans, etc., etc. And let's do that by kind of chipping away at the British by attacking shipping in the channel. That's a good use of our bombs and our Stuka dive bombers. At the same time, the British are thinking, well, if they're attacking our shipping, we've got to sort of defend them. But on the other hand, Keith Park, who is the commander of 11 Group down, which covers the southeast of England, and Dowding, who is the commander-in-chief of RAF Fighting Command, whose task after all is to defend England. They're thinking, well, we don't want to waste our planes over the channel where, if they bail out, they're in the drink and might not be recovered again. So the question is why are they responding at all? And the reason is because we still need these East Coast convoys, because it's the movement of oil and foodstuffs and, the general kind of sort of day-to-day operations of the country. They haven't abandoned the East Coast convoys at this point. But to limit the damage, Keith Park has ordered that only flights go out. So flight is 6. So a British squadron you'd have 12 airborne at any one time, divided into A flight and B flight, which is then divided into sectors. The point is you've got these 4 different colours. And you're sending out 2 sections of 3, 1 flight of 6. That's how they're sending them out, to try and minimise the number of planes, because obviously the more planes you send over, there's always proportion are going to be injured and attacked and hit. And
they've been training in flights rather than squadrons up to this point because they're inventing the techniques they need to defend the country anyway. So the flight within the squadron is the sort of standard unit of people who can fly coherently together. Because there are limitations on what they could do with the radio technology they've got as well. And all this technology is new. All these techniques are new.
Look at the losses of the RAF. 14th of July, 1 pilot killed, 1 plane shot down. Monday, the 15th of July, no pilots killed, 2 planes lost. 16th of July, 1 pilot killed, 1 plane lost. I mean, so it's not excessive.
The ratios on both those last 2 days are 1 to 4. So the RAF lose 1 for the Luftwaffe losing 4. So, and the same again on the 17th of July. That'll do. That's a cost they're prepared to bear.
So the question is so why is Fighter Command responding to this? Because they're trying to chip away at the Luftwaffe as well, in exactly the same way that the Luftwaffe is trying to chip out. Whatever they can shoot down now, the Germans then aren't going to have for the main attack when they know it. When the British know it's going to come. So it's a fine line, it's a balance, and this is why you get not very many Spitfires and Hurricanes taking on the Luftwaffe in July 1940. Things are picking up. And it's interesting, on the 17th of July, Churchill visits the south coast. And this is where that famous picture of him is taken with holding the Tommy gun with the bowler hat and the cigar and all the rest of it.
But at the time, Jim, that's one of the 6 Tommy guns in the country, basically, isn't it? That's the unfortunate truth.
But it's all about image. It's all about impressions.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Gives the notion that we've got lots of submachine guns. But anyway, he's accompanied by Colonel Raymond Lee, and he is the US military attaché. Lee Lee keeps a very, very good diary, which is fascinating. He's an Anglophile. He's a big fan, and he thinks that somehow Britain's going to hold on. So he's an antidote to the American ambassador, Joe Kennedy, father of JFK and RFK. And he writes in his diary, every day that he puts it off is immensely valuable. He's talking about Hitler here. And I should say that in another 3 weeks, the coastline will be nearly impregnable to ordinary attack. Well, it's like, hooray, because what he's seeing is, coils of barbed wire and mines and, and so on. And the truth is, by the kind of third week of July, there's 1.3 million troops in Britain, including the local defence volunteers, which will in August become the Home Guard, as well as 22,000 Canadians already, 16,000 Aussies and Kiwis from New Zealand. And the monthly intake from conscription is about 50,000. So, literally every hour that passes is good news for Britain's chances. They might have the numbers, but they haven't got the kit. That's the problem.
And they certainly don't have the guns. In June, there's only 25 pounders produced at all. So, yeah, there are some shortcomings. But, I mean, he's right, though. Lee is right. Every day it's put off is a step ahead for the British. Every day they delay. Because, after all, You'll get through the summer and the weather will get worse. There's all that to consider as well if you're trying to cross the channel.
Well, yes, and there's these little markers of increased intensity. And one of those, it's quite a major marker actually, is the 19th of July. It's the same day that Hitler makes his peace offer at the Kroll Opera House in Berlin. But there's fierce activity on Dover. This is Stukas coming over and attacking shipping in the ports, and Defiance of 141 Squadron are still in operation, and they're absolutely hammered. And just after noon, the RDF stations, which we'll come to in our next episode, RDF being what now known as radar, they detect signs of enemy concentrations. By 12:15, the Stukas are already attacking 2 destroyers in Dover Harbour. The defending fighters only leave the ground at around 12:20, and this is 111 Squadron of Hurricanes and 141 Squadron in Defiance. And the Defiance are actually ordered to go and fly straight to Cap Gris-Nez at 5,000 feet to go and hammer the German fighters and the Stukas, but they're spotted by 109s. 141 Squadron claims to have shot down 4 109s, but this is pretty unlikely, to be fair. Whatever was the score, there was only one lesson to be learned, writes the official history of the Battle of Britain, and that is that it was folly to send a turret fighter, such as a Defiant, into action in an area in which it might meet the 109.
I mean, for those that don't know what the Defiant is, right? I know a solid We Have Ways, an independent company member, a listener of many years, will know exactly what the Bolt and Pull Defiant is. But basically, this is a fighter that at a glance looks like a Hurricane. It's got a Merlin engine. It's got that same kind of wing shape. But what it's got behind the pilot is a gun turret with 4 machine guns in that can rotate and be aimed at passing targets or whatever. And the problem with that is the turret is very, very, very heavy. And you may have a Merlin engine in it, like a Spitfire Hurricane, but it's extremely slow. It hasn't got any forward-firing guns, so it can't line up behind something and give it a squirt. You're reliant on the guy behind the pilot, and they're busted flush.
Well, you can see how the designers are thinking this might be a good idea. Hey, we'll tell you what, we'll have a fast modern monoplane, can do 300 miles an hour at a stretch. But the great thing is, rather than just having machine guns pointing one way, this one you can move wherever you want. What's not to like? Well, what's not to like is it's not fast enough, it's not mobile enough, you can't bring the guns to bear, and they get slaughtered every time they venture forth, which is exactly what happens on this occasion. So 2 Defiants are immediately shot down in the first engagement, 7 more in the ensuing melee. So, they're on their trying to get to Cap Gris-Nez. In fact, they're just falling in droves over Dover Harbour. 111 Squadron joins too late, although does claim 3 109s. Only 3 Defiants return. 4 pilots are killed, 2 wounded, 6 air gunners killed in action. 2 days later, 141 Squadron of Defiance is moved from the Biggin Hill sector to Prestwick, and it's followed on the 24th by all the other by the only other Defiant Squadron, and that is the Defiance gone from the Battle of Britain.
Oh, that's, because it does look like a plane a 6-year-old, 7-year-old would design. It's got a turret on it.
But even on that day of disaster for the Defiance, the Luftwaffe lose more aircrew than the RAF. They're really focusing on the kind of, the narrow stretch of the channel between Dover and Cap Gris-Nez in the Pas de Calais.
They're concentrating what they're capable of. And it makes a lot of sense to attack shipping. This is after all what Raider has recommended, that you attack shipping and you disrupt Britain's maritime trade, actually, on the face of it, it's pretty sensible, isn't it?
Yes, and in the meantime, the build-up of the Luftwaffe is continuing in the Pas-de-Calais, in airfields in the Low Countries, in Holland and Belgium, in northern France and in Normandy, and indeed even on the Channel Islands. Hitler, for the first time, mentions an earlier attack on Russia than originally planned. Originally, sort of talking, very loosely about 1943, 1944, something like that. He now mentions, maybe we need to do it sooner. And on the same day, Sunday, the 21st of July, that is the first major Luftwaffe planning conference that Göring holds for the attack on England, which is held at Carinhall, which is his great big mansion kind of to the northeast of Berlin in the woods up there. At this conference, where he has all his senior commanders there, he's quite specific about instructions for his fighters. He goes, putting the majority of the fighters and the Storer close to the bomber formations will prevent them from being used as effectively as they might. They would be unable to achieve their full fighting capability and would inevitably have high losses. He couldn't have been clearer about this point. In other words, what he's saying is, you can't have your fighter planes doing close escorts of the bombers. What you need is your fighter planes to operate at their max speed, max capability. That is the way to use your fighters. And on this, he's absolutely spot on. But anyone who's listening to this episode and future episodes in this series, hold on to that thought, because he might change his mind.
This is the signature of the entire battle, isn't it? Because he can't make his mind up. His boss can't make his mind up. So he can't make his mind up, so the people below him can't make their minds up. No one can make their minds up, but the British have made their minds up. It's about how they're going to defend Britain. Yeah. So what you have is this sort of constant churn of indecision against actually a set of people who've decided what they're going to do and how they're going to improve it as they go forward. Whereas the Germans don't get the chance even to improve what they're doing because they keep changing their minds.
No, exactly. And the air fighting continues while all this is going on, while there's prevaricating is going on, little lone raids, little Stukas going on. So for example, 87 Squadron for Fighter Command, they're flying Hurricanes, they're based at Exeter in the southwest. And at 5 a.m., they're waiting for their breakfast. They're having a little nap before Brecker. And suddenly they're told that a patrol is needed over Lundy Island. So Roland B. Beaumont, who is a pre-war pilot, has served in France in Hurricanes in 87 Squadron, survived and got back home again. He is one of three to take off. And they just clear the Devon coast when they spot a Ju-88, a single Ju-88 twin-engine bomber. And Beaumont's two colleagues, who are Rob Vos Jeff and Harry Mitchell, they head off towards it through a gap in the clouds, but Beaumont dives to the left of the cloud, hoping to cut off the Junkers, and ends up right behind it as he comes out of the cloud, ahead of Vos Jeff and Mitchell. So he opens fire at just 200 yards. Pretty soon, the rear gunner on the Junkers 88 starts firing, and then smoke starts streaming from the plane, and the Ju-88 arcs downwards in a gentle dive, and Beaumont follows it as it crosses back over the coast. He thinks no crew can ever escape, but then suddenly sees one parachute blossom, and a moment later, it's kind of the pilot is touching the ground just as the Junkers 88 is hitting the ground and sliding across a field through a hedge. Then the back of it is broken and catches fire. But as Beaumont's circling around him, he's watching all the rest of the crew clamber out and then sees an old Morris truck trundle towards it, and the ALDV, the local defence volunteers, get out and round up the crew. And as Beaumont noted, we returned to breakfast with a considerably stimulated appetite. But I think it's a nice little vignette, that, because it demonstrates a different type of engagement that's going on. Lone raiders. This is the Luftwaffe trying to find out what's going on. It's kind of part reconnaissance mission. It's trying to find targets. They're kind of probing away, trying different things, while the Stukas are kind of, attacking Harwich or Dover or whatever, or Southend. These lone planes are also going on. And also more and more Luftwaffe fighter planes are reaching the front. So on the same day, 24th of July, Gunter Rahl, who ends up becoming the third highest ace ever in the history of aviation, with 275 kills by the time the war's end. But at this point in July 1940, he's very much kind of sort of new to this game. And he's part of the third group of Jagdgeschwader 52, JG52. And they reach Coquelles in the Pas-de-Calais. On the 22nd July. From there, he can see the White Cliffs. And Coquelles is another very hastily built rough field. These are all having to be carved out of farmland immediately. The rye has been cut by a resentful farmer. A small hay barn has been turned into an ops room. But the field isn't remotely flat. There's a big ridge in the middle of it. And from where you take off on one side to the other side, you can't see the other side. So it's quite substantial. And taking off in a mass scramble, that makes that very, very difficult. It's also very difficult in a plane like a Messerschmitt 109, which is quite sensitive to take off and land in. And by the 24th of July, they've only had one orientation flight. But be that as it may, at 1 o'clock, they're ordered to 2,000 metres, so that's about 6,000 feet, to join Stukas of 1 STG-2 over Boulogne at 1:20. So they do that. It's a grey, drizzly day. And they've been ordered to escort the Stukas. So not operate at their own speed, but close escort them, which goes exactly against what Göring had said just 3 days earlier. No one's happy about it. They're all really grumpy about it. Raw, like every other fighter pilot, believes the best way to protect the bombers, such as the Stukas, is to fly ahead with height and speed and clear the air ahead of them.
So why are they not doing that?
Well, because at a localized level, the bomber commanders seem to have the kind of higher rank, and they're issuing the orders saying, no, we want to be close escorted. They've just got their tactics wrong. Anyway, they meet up with the Stukas. They fly over at just 160 miles per hour. I mean, the 109s are almost kind of falling out of the sky. Then suddenly, with no warning at all, the Spitfires are all over the place. And these are from 6, 10 and 54 Squadron. Pouncing on them as the Stukas are attacking Dover Port. And in seconds, Rawls' group, they're all separated. There's no question at all of protecting the Stukas. They're all looking after themselves and trying to kind of get out of the melee. And as he noted in his diary, Roll writes, "The Tommies caught us just as we had feared, like proverbial clay pigeons." And several pilots are missing, so they get back home, back to Coquel on their bumpy airfield, rough airfield. The 7th Staffel commander, Herbert Firmer, and one of the pilots, Eric Frank, they're both missing. Also gone is the Gruppe commander, Wolf Dietrich von Heuwald. Von Heuwald and Frank are both washed up in Dunkirk a few days later. And Roll's own 8th Staffel commander, Lovar Ehrlich, is also gone. So he's only 22 years old, and he's now told to take command of the 8th Staffel. And they just can't understand how the Spitfires had known how to find them, because, of course, it wasn't like this in Poland and France. And the reason is because the Luftwaffe intelligence is absolutely dreadful. And before we finish this episode, we should just have a quick look at the Luftwaffe intelligence picture.
And it's rotten for lots of reasons, but principally good old-fashioned Nazi reasons, isn't it? Which are that you've got the wrong man in the wrong job, which is a fellow called Oberst Josef Beppo Schmidt, who's a beer hall putsch thug. He's from the old days, one of the old fighters. He's one of Göring's cronies. He doesn't do foreign languages, but he's been in the punch-ups back in the old days. Göring also, as well as having him running his intelligence, Göring has his own intelligence service called the Forschungsamt, which is actually just for him spying on his rivals. And Hitler lets that go. And then you've also got the official intelligence source, which is 3rd Abteilung under General Martini, who's handling Sigel's intelligence. And then 5th Abteilung are also, they're supposed to get Foreign Air Force intelligence.
Well, the interesting thing about this is that Schmidt is the head of the 5th Abteilung, but because he's on Göring's personal staff, even though he's a colonel, he's more important than Martini, who is a general. And you couldn't have someone less qualified for this task of picking up foreign intelligence and foreign information on foreign air forces, because he doesn't speak any other languages.
He's built on a thing called Studi Blau, which is from 39, which has been prepared by Milk, who'd been to Britain and had a look at what was going on and been writing to British booksellers to get extra info. Dear Waterstones, I am most interested in the status of the Royal Air Force. Again, the harebrained naivety at the heart of it. But basically, Schmidt presents this picture on the 16th of July. And obviously, lots of things are all happening on the same day.
Yeah, but isn't it interesting that it's him that's presenting this picture? His intelligence report on the British Air Forces, even though he's a colonel and Martini is a general. I mean, it's just bonkers.
He says that the RAF have 675 Spitfires and Hurricanes. He says he's not far off, but he doesn't know about what's in place.
He hasn't got a clue. This is a ballpark figure. He's plucked that out of nowhere, by the way.
Yeah, it looks like it. That sounds about right. And he doesn't know that the British have a thing in place called the Civilian Repair Organisation. He doesn't know about shadow factories and all the stuff that the British have in place to produce new aircraft. He also is thinking in terms of airframes rather than people, because after all, the planes are one thing, it's the pilots that are another. And in fact, that's where the pinch comes for the RAF, is in terms of personnel. And he claims that the Messerschmitt 110, the Zerstörer, the destroyer, is superior to the Hurricane, which is it's an optimistic way of looking at things. And most importantly, he does not know that the RAF's in its commands, which are Coastal Command, Fighter Command, Bomber Command, Training Command. He doesn't know about any of that. And the thing he really doesn't know about is the air defence system.
There is no mention of it at all. I mean, it is just extraordinary. And the interesting thing about it, he also claims that the RAF structure is rigid and inflexible, which is just bizarre, because basically literally everything he says is incorrect. It's just really, really interesting. And his conclusion is this: the Luftwaffe is clearly superior to the RAF as regards strength, equipment, training, command, and location of bases.
Wow.
And actually, the bases are a huge advantage for the RAF because they're widespread. They're all over the place. Whereas the Luftwaffe fighter bases are now all in one area in the Pas-de-Calais, which is, makes it a very tight, target-rich area.
And are improvised. That's the other thing, is the RAF. These are RAF prepared positions with the infrastructure and everything that goes with them prepared and ready. Whereas the Luftwaffe has had to rush to France to set itself up in a great hurry. So everything's inadequately sourced and resourced. There's a lot to be said for the fact that the Germans have absolutely no idea what they're getting themselves into, isn't there, at this stage of the war?
Yeah.
Thank God for that. The thing is, though, their intelligence about the state of the French army before Case Yellow is crap too, right? But they get lucky. Whereas here they are winging it and they get it wrong.
But by the end of July, convoys are still being hammered. Flights are still being sent out to intercept the raiders as they're attacking these convoys. Everyone's getting pissed off. 609 Squadron, for example, based at Middle Wallop. They go down to a forward base at Warmwell, which is in Dorset, it's just near Dorchester. They're losing men, and they kind of think, well, what's the point? Why are we doing this? Why are we losing men when we're not actually really achieving very much? Dowding, the Commander-in-Chief of Fighter Command, is also worried. Accidents are adding to the casualty list. Exhausted pilots are no good to anyone, and he's quite right. So he orders at the end of July that all pilots must have at least 8 hours rest per day and 24 hours leave a week. And that's one of the reasons why you need more than 12 pilots in a squadron. You need 20 to 24 because you always need 12 to be in the air at any one time. And this means 10 to 12 pilots per flight of 6. So that's your 20 to 24 pilots per squadron.
So this combat continues at this kind of intensity until the end of July, really, doesn't it? And with the RAF essentially generally maintaining the upper hand every day in terms of numbers. This is very interesting, isn't it? Because the RAF have lost 91 aircraft, 68 aircrew. The Luftwaffe have lost twice as many aircraft, 185, and 348 aircrew are lost. This is for the month where things haven't got going yet. The direction of travel, if you're the Luftwaffe, is not good, right?
No, it's not good. And what we'll do in our next episode is we'll actually look at the organisation of both Fighter Command and the British Air Defence System, which is new and untested, and also what the Germans have got. We've talked a bit about their intelligence and their woeful intelligence, but let's have a look at their other structures and stuff. And then we'll go back into kind of what becomes known as the second phase, which of course is the great launch of the attack of the Eagles, Adlerangriff, which begins wholeheartedly or damp squibbly, depending on which way you look at it. But that's all to come. So that is very much the kind of the scene setter, I would say. And we've got a bit more scene setting to do in our next episode as we look at how these two sides are organised themselves. And let me tell you, it's quite different. So
we'll see you for our next episode. If you need to listen to these or watch these all in one giant chunk, then become a Patreon member, become officer class, where these nuggets of wisdom can be delivered to you without adverts. Thanks very much for listening. You have been watching Al Murray and James Holland. We'll see you soon. Cheerio.